Hi guys, and welcome back to another video, or your first video, I don't know, but welcome anyway. And this video is going to be my May 2021 reading wrap up. Sorry it's late. I had a very bad cold for the first few weeks of the month and all the last few weeks of last month, and I just didn't have the voice or the energy to film this video because I read so much last month. I really got back into my stride of reading, but as I was still sort of getting back into things, I really couldn't focus, or I really didn't want to focus on anything that was too long that I had to put a lot of time and effort into. So I ended up reading a lot of very short things. So I'm going to split this video up into sections, and the first one of those is going to be the books I DNF'd. So the first one of those is a book called Rick. Now, I read another book by this author called George, which I thought was very good. But I started to read this and I was like, I think I'm just too old for it. So this is a middle grade book about a young boy sort of learning that he might be queer and trying to discover that about his identity and sort of just living life in school. And I thought this was going to be a sort of middle grade book that would be sort of transferable and really heartwarming and sweet to an adult reader, and I do think this is a sort of middle grade book that would work really well for the age range it is intended to, and it doesn't really have a lot of transfer over potential into older age ranges. So I just chalked it down to I'm too old for it, but if you know someone who is that age range, I would highly recommend. I think that Alex Gino is a very talented writer. So another book that I DNF'd this month was Johnny Appleseed by Joshua Whitehead. Now, I really wanted to enjoy this one because I'm trying to make more of a conscious effort to pick up books by Indigenous authors, but this book just didn't work for me. I think that if it was written in a more linear format, I think I could have gotten on board with it, but it was so scattered and so meandering and so sort of back and forth that I was just getting really confused. And so I would be interested in picking up more by this author. I think that it was very raw and very sort of emotional and really vulnerable, I found. It's not really the sort of book that has any sort of inherent plot. It's about a young man who is sort of travelling back to his family on the res when one of his family members died for a funeral, and sort of the experiences he has leading up to that and before, and flashbacks and flash forwards, and I do think it was good. It just jumped around a bit too much for my taste. And the third book that I DNF'd this month is just a comic that I did not get on with the humour, which is How to Tell If Your Cat Is Plotting to Kill You. I thought the first couple were kind of funny, but as I was reading on, I just didn't find them funny. I think that this is definitely for some people, but humour is so subjective. So if this seems like it might be the sort of thing for you, absolutely go check it out. Just wasn't for me, didn't find it funny, DNF'd it. So the next sort of category that I've put books into are comics that are not so much a linear story, but are just collections of an artist's work. So I read, how many did I read? I read 7 of those this month. 2 of them I didn't really like that much, so I'll talk about them from the ones I like the least to the ones I like the most. So the first one being Twitter, the Comic, the Book. I really like the art style, but the humour, I didn't get it. I think that, I don't know, maybe I'm just not into Twitter humour and that's why I didn't understand it, but it just wasn't for me. Another one I gave 3 stars, didn't really jive with it, was All My Friends Are Still Dead. Now, I read and really enjoyed All My Friends Are Dead. I think that it's really simple, but it did really appeal to me. But this kind of felt like an add-on. It didn't really add anything or do anything different from the first one, so meh, just sort of fine. And then the other 5, all of them are just collections of the artist's comics, and all I'm going to say is I really enjoy their art style. I really related to these comics. I don't really have much to say about any of them individually, given the fact they have no inherent plot, but I read Adulthood is a Myth, Big Mushy Happy Lump, Heart and Brain Gut Instincts, Little Moments of Love, and Book Love. And all of those I gave 5 stars to. I thought they were all really good. So moving on to the next sort of section is comics that do have a plot line, that do have a linear story, and I read 4 of those, and I'll go through those from the ones I like the least to the ones I like the most. So the first one was Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks. Now, I thought this was fine. I gave it 3 stars. I think that it would be more relatable to someone living in the US. So the whole thing takes place over the course of a day working at a pumpkin patch. It follows 2 main characters, and it's their last day working there before they head off to college. And I thought it was fine. The plot revolves around one of the characters trying to help the other get the confidence to finally talk to his crush. And I just thought it was cute, it was fun, I love the art, but I'm probably never going to think about it again. It was fine, gave it 3 stars. Now the next 3 all got 4 stars. I like them all equally, so this is in no particular order. So the next one I read was the Ladybird book of The Hangover, and I don't really know whether to put this in comic or novel just because there's so little writing and so many pictures, but this was just a funny book that I found in a used bookstore, and I think that it was just really amusing. It's in this sort of series of Ladybird books, which are books that you normally give to kids to sort of teach them something about the world, teach them something about a science or anything really, and they've made versions of these books for an adult audience, sort of with made up facts about adult things, and I just found this really fun, and I can think of a couple of my friends who I think would really enjoy this, so I might get them a copy. The next one was The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. Now I have been seeing this absolutely everywhere, and it's been getting such rave reviews, so it didn't really seem to interest me from the synopsis, but I just picked it up because I was really curious, and I did end up really enjoying it. Like I said, I gave this 4 stars. It's essentially a book that you can kind of read in any order, although there is a very loose story running through it, but essentially each page is just a lovely quote about life accompanied by the artist's illustrations. And I just thought it was really lovely, and if you have been wondering what the hype is about, go for it. I thought it was really beautiful. And the last one in this category is Blue is the Warmest Colour, and I really loved this. I've been meaning to watch the film, and now that I've read it I want to even more. I think this was a really beautiful look at a relationship, really, from start to finish. It was never the sort of most healthy relationship. I don't really think the characters were supposed to be right for each other, or it wasn't really supposed to be a relationship that the reader was like, yeah, that's the sort of relationship I want. But it was so raw and emotive, and it was just so real. The characters were going through such real things. It wasn't sort of escapist, fluffy romance, and you know from the get-go that things are gonna go tits, and you still get so attached to these characters. And I would say if you're really bothered by sort of depictions of homophobia and sort of overdose, death, drug use, grief, like if you were sort of triggered by any of those topics, I would steer clear or tread with caution, but it was really beautiful story. It's also not the sort of art style that I normally gravitate towards in graphic novels. It took me a while to really get into it and to sort of figure out whether or not I liked it. I think that I'm sort of in a middle ground. I think that it's sort of more sketchy. I think that from certain face angles I thought the characters looked really interesting and dynamic, but I don't know what it was about it, but certain angles of face made the faces look really gaunt, and it kind of creeped me out a little bit. So the next book that didn't really fit into any of the categories that I had down, so there's only one in this category, is poetry, and I read The Princess Saves Herself in this one. Now I am not normally a poetry person. I find that often so much of it is steeped in metaphor that I really have to have someone else explain what the author was actually trying to say with the poetry, and I just don't have the energy for that. However, this one was very to the point and very blunt and raw, and I really identified with it. I did notice that a lot of the Goodreads reviews that I read after finishing it were like, oh, well, I can write poetry too if it's just hitting spacebar every couple of words. Which, fair enough if that's their opinion, and they are probably way smarter than me in English, so good for them. But what I really loved about it was that it took a concept and a story and it narrowed it down and stripped away anything superfluous to it, and I think that it then made it really impactful for me. I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well, but I did really enjoy this and would highly recommend, especially if you're someone who just wants authors to get straight to the point and don't really like metaphor.